The radar screen went dark at 3:47 hours, and nobody in the tower said a word. They'd all seen aircraft vanish before: technical failures, enemy fire, pilot error, but this felt different. Callsign Revenant had been circling a valley in the Hindu Kush for 90 minutes, covering a ground extraction gone sideways, when her transponder simply ceased to exist. No mayday, no final transmission, just the empty hiss of dead air where her voice had been. The controller, a captain named Briggs who'd worked this board for 7 years, removed his headset and set it down gently, as if any sudden movement might shatter what was left of the night. Outside, the tarmac stretched black and wet under floodlights, waiting for a silhouette that would never break the horizon. Or so they thought. Revenant's real name was Nayeli Ortega, though nobody had called her that since flight school. She'd earned her call sign after surviving a training accident that should have killed her, an engine fire at 12,000 feet that she'd nursed down to a deadstick landing in a Nebraska cornfield. The airframe was totaled. She walked away with a fractured rib and a reputation for being too stubborn to die. That was 11 years ago. Now she flew the A-10 Thunderbolt II, a plane the Air Force kept threatening to retire and never quite could. It was ugly, slow, and built around a cannon that sounded like the sky tearing in half, perfect for someone like her. The mission brief had been straightforward: provide close air support for a 6-man SEAL team extracting a high-value target from a compound near the Pakistani border. Intelligence said the area was cold. Intelligence was wrong. The SEALs hit the compound and walked into a hornet's nest: 30-plus hostiles with RPGs, heavy machine guns, and something that might have been a Zu-23 anti-aircraft gun. Revenant arrived overhead just as the team lead, callsign Havoc 6, screamed for fire support. She didn't hesitate. She dropped low below the ridgeline and opened up with the GAU-8 Avenger, that 7-barrel rotary cannon that turned armored vehicles into scrap metal. The sound alone was enough to make men scatter. But wars are not won by sound. She made 3 passes, shredding gun emplacements and buying the SEALs time to move. On the 4th pass, something caught her. A shoulder-fired missile, maybe 2, she couldn't tell in the chaos, and her aircraft shuddered like a wounded animal. Alarms screamed. Hydraulics failed. Her right engine coughed black smoke. She pulled up hard, trying to gain altitude, and that's when the radio went silent. Back at the tower, Briggs stared at the empty screen and wondered if he should call it. Wondered if he should mark her KIA and start the paperwork. He'd done it before, but something stopped him. Maybe intuition, maybe hope. He kept the frequency open just in case. And in the mountains, 70 miles away, Nayeli Ortega was still flying. Her cockpit was a disaster. Warning lights painted her face in red and amber. The stick felt mushy, unresponsive, like steering a truck through mud. She'd lost most of her hydraulics. One engine was dead, and the other was running hot enough to melt. Fuel was hemorrhaging from a punctured tank somewhere in the wing. Every instinct told her to eject, to punch out and take her chances with the parachute. But the SEALs were still down there, still moving through that valley with hostiles on their heels. If she left now, they'd die. Simple as that. So she didn't leave. She circled back, coaxing the crippled warthog into a shallow bank, and keyed the radio. Static answered. Her comms were fried. She tried again, switching channels, cycling through backups, but got nothing. She was alone up here, flying a dying plane over enemy mountains with no way to call for help. Most pilots would have panicked. Nayeli Ortega took a breath, tightened her grip on the stick, and went back to work. She could still see the SEALs through her targeting pod, 6 thermal signatures moving fast through a ravine, pursued by a cluster of hostiles. No comms meant no coordination, but she didn't need words to understand what was needed. She lined up another strafing run, ignoring the way her aircraft shook and groaned, and squeezed the trigger. The cannon roared. 50 rounds chewed through rock and flesh. The hostiles scattered. The SEALs kept moving. She pulled up, slower this time, the airframe protesting every degree of climb, and tried to gain enough altitude to clear the ridgeline. That's when the second engine quit. Just stopped, no warning, no sputter, total loss of thrust. The nose dropped. The mountains rushed up to meet her. For a moment, just a brief crystalline moment, she accepted that this was it. She'd bought the SEALs enough time. They'd make it out. That would have to be enough. But then muscle memory took over. She trimmed the nose, trading what little altitude she had for airspeed, and turned the A-10 into a glider. A 30-ton glider made of titanium and spike. She trained for this theoretically. Deadstick landings were part of the syllabus, but training was done over flat desert with emergency crews standing by, not over mountains in the dark with hostiles below and no engine to restart. She scanned for options. The valley ahead widened slightly, maybe enough for a belly landing if she could stretch the glide. It wasn't a good option. It was just the only one. She aimed for it, adjusting her descent with tiny stick movements, every input deliberate. The ground rose to meet her. Closer, closer. She could see individual trees now, boulders, the silver thread of a stream. She braced for impact. And then, impossibly, the left engine coughed back to life. Not smoothly, it sounded like a garbage disposal eating silverware, but it ran. Barely. Just enough thrust to arrest her descent, to give her a few more minutes. She didn't question it, didn't pray or thank anyone. She just flew, nursing that dying engine, coaxing every last ounce of power from machinery that should have quit miles ago. The ridgeline passed beneath her. The valley opened up. And ahead, far in the distance, she could see the faint glow of base lights. 40 miles, might as well be 1,000. Back at the tower, Briggs was writing the incident report when the radio crackled. Just static at first, then something else. A broken transmission, a voice distant and distorted. He grabbed his headset, pressed it to his ear. Say again, more static, then clear as day. Revenant, inbound, might need a new paint job. The tower erupted. Controllers jumped from their seats. Phones rang. Someone called for emergency vehicles. Briggs stared at the radar screen, willing it to show something. And then it did. A single blip, moving slow, too slow, but moving. Revenant was coming home. She appeared on the horizon 15 minutes later, a dark shape against the pre-dawn gray, trailing smoke like a wounded comet. The A-10 looked like it had flown through a shredder. The right engine nacelle was gone, just a twisted stump trailing wires. The vertical stabilizer was shredded, barely attached. Fuel streamed from a dozen punctures, leaving a dark rainbow in her wake. But she was flying. Somehow, impossibly, she was still in the air. The tower cleared her for immediate landing. Foam trucks lined the runway. Medical crews stood ready. Briggs guided her in, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his veins. Revenant, you're cleared to land any runway, any direction. Emergency equipment is standing by. Her reply was calm, almost casual. Copy, runway 23, and tell maintenance I'm sorry about the paint. Someone in the tower laughed, a release of tension so sharp it hurt. She brought the Warthog down like she was parking a car, smooth and deliberate despite the aircraft's protests. The landing gear groaned but held. The tires kissed the runway. Foam trucks raced alongside as she coasted to a stop, the left engine finally giving up with a sound like tearing metal. Silence fell. The canopy opened. Nayeli Ortega climbed out, moving slowly, her flight suit torn and stained, her face pale beneath her helmet. She stood on the wing, looked at the gathered crews, and gave a small, tired smile. Then she sat down hard, legs dangling over the side, and closed her eyes. Briggs found her in the debriefing room 2 hours later after the medics cleared her, bruised ribs, minor burns, severe dehydration, but alive. She was staring at a cup of coffee like it held the secrets of the universe. He sat down across from her, unsure what to say. Finally, how? She didn't look up. Didn't want to walk home. He waited for more. She sipped the coffee, winced, set it down. The SEALs make it out, he nodded. All 6, thanks to you. She nodded once, satisfied, and said nothing else. But others talked. Havoc 6, the SEAL team lead, sent a personal message to the wing commander, detailing how Revenant had stayed on station with a dying aircraft, making run after run, covering their extract until they were clear. He used words like heroic and fearless. The wing commander forwarded it up the chain. Within a week, it reached the Pentagon. Within 2 weeks, Nayeli Ortega was being briefed on something she'd never wanted, a medal ceremony. She hated the attention, always had. Flight school had been full of people who wanted to be famous, who saw the cockpit as a path to glory. She just wanted to fly, to be good at something that mattered. The ceremony was scheduled for the following month, but news traveled fast. Junior pilots who'd barely spoken to her before suddenly found reasons to stop by the squadron. Some wanted advice. Some wanted to hear the story firsthand. A few, the honest ones, just wanted to shake her hand. One young lieutenant, fresh from training, asked her what she'd been thinking when the engines quit. Naomi considered the question, leaning back against the hangar wall, still sore from the landing. "I wasn't thinking," she said finally. "Thinking gets you killed. You train until it's instinct, then you trust the instinct." The lieutenant nodded, scribbling notes like she was taking a class. Naomi watched her and felt something unexpected: responsibility. These kids looked up to her now. That meant something. The maintenance crew chief, a grizzled master sergeant named Kowalski, was less impressed. He walked her through the hangar to see her aircraft, now stripped down and being rebuilt. "You owe this bird an apology," he said, gesturing at the carcass of twisted metal and burned wiring. "She kept you alive and you treated her like a rental car." Naomi ran a hand along the damaged fuselage, feeling the rough edges of shrapnel holes. "She did keep me alive," she agreed quietly. "Best bird I ever flew." Kowalski grunted, mollified. "I'll pass that along to the rivets." The medal ceremony arrived like an ambush. Naomi stood in dress blues she'd had to borrow because hers didn't fit anymore. She'd lost weight during the recovery. Generals gave speeches. Cameras flashed. They pinned the Distinguished Flying Cross to her chest, and she stood at attention, jaw tight, eyes forward, wishing she were anywhere else. Afterward, at the reception, an older colonel approached her. He'd flown in Vietnam, back when the A-10 was still new. "I read your after-action report," he said. "You stayed on station 45 minutes after the damage. Most pilots would have belayed." She met his eyes. "The SEALs couldn't bail," he smiled, a sad, knowing expression. "No, they couldn't. That's why you're here and a lot of good pilots aren't." He walked away before she could respond. That night, alone in her quarters, she looked at the medal. It was heavy, heavier than she'd expected. Not the medal itself, but the weight of what it represented. 6 men were alive because she'd made a choice, because she'd flown a broken plane through hostile fire instead of taking the easy way out. She thought about all the choices that had led her here: joining the Air Force against her family's wishes, pushing through flight school when instructors said she was too small, too quiet, too whatever. Every step had been a fight, and now this. She placed the medal in a drawer and didn't look at it again for months, but others did. Her story spread beyond the base, picked up by military blogs and aviation forums. Footage of her landing, grainy, shot from a distance, went viral. People called her a hero. She ignored them. Heroes were people in movies. She was just a pilot who'd gotten lucky. Except luck had nothing to do with it, and everyone who knew aviation understood that. The A-10 community, a tight-knit group of pilots who flew the unloved, unglamorous close air support missions, adopted her as something more than a peer. She became proof that the Warthog, and those who flew it, still mattered. In an age of stealth jets and drone strikes, she'd done what high-tech couldn't. She'd stayed when it was hard, fought when it was impossible, and brought everyone home. The SEALs sent her a gift, a custom patch with her call sign and the date of the mission, surrounded by 6 stars, one for each life saved. She put it on her flight suit and wore it every mission after. It became her talisman, her reminder, not of what she'd survived, but of why she'd survived it. Because sometimes the mission isn't about coming home. Sometimes it's about making sure someone else does. Months later, she was back in the cockpit, flying a newly rebuilt, with her name stenciled below the canopy. The aircraft handled like a dream, all the damage erased, every system perfect. But she missed the old one, the bird that had refused to die. Kowalski had saved a piece of the wreckage, a section of fuselage with shrapnel scars, and mounted it in the squadron-ready room. Beneath it, a small plaque: Revenant, 347 hours, never quit. She stood in front of it sometimes between missions and remembered the mountains, the dark valley, the moment the engine died and she'd thought it was over, the choice she'd made to keep flying. She didn't regret it, not the fear, not the pain, not the months of recovery, because those 6 SEALs went home to their families, because the next generation of pilots had a story to believe in, Because when the tower gave up hope, she'd crawled back, bleeding fire and steel, and proved that some things are worth the cost. And on quiet nights when the base was dark and the flight line empty, you could still hear it, the distant echo of a warthog's cannon, the sound of someone refusing to quit. Revenant's legacy wasn't in the medal or the ceremony or the viral footage. It was in the sky itself, in every pilot who faced the impossible and chose to stay. That was the real story. That was what mattered. The tower had given up hope, but Nayeli Ortega never did, and that made all the difference.